On today's show, Amen Thompson already ranked in the top 50 best players in the NBA. What are his next steps in order to climb even higher next season? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. On today's show, we're going to continue breaking down the Locked On NBA Top 100 Players poll, where Amen Thompson did crack the top 50 after just 2 years in the NBA. What are his next steps to continue to climb up this list of the best players in the NBA? The polarizing Fred VanVleet and where he falls, despite still being 64th on the list, and were Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, and Steven Adams snubbed by not being included at all on this top 100 list. We're going to get to all of that on today's show, and of course, want to thank you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Here's we continue our breakdown of the Locked On NBA Top 100 Players poll. And we did the breakdown. We highlighted Kevin Durant clocking in at 11th last week, as well as Alperen Sengun showing up at 36th, which both of them felt a little disrespectful to me, at least, and we kind of hashed it out last week, so go check out those episodes if you missed them. On today's show, we're going to be getting into Amen Thompson cracking the top 50 after just 2 years in the NBA. Should he possibly be even higher than what he was listed at? Fred VanVleet at 64, and should Jabari, Tari, or Steven Adams have made the cut for the top 100 players in the NBA? We've got all that coming your way. Madison, let's just start right here. Amen Thompson, ranked 49th. He just barely made the top 50. How do you feel about that ranking?
When you said in a vacuum, I was like, 49th, all right, I'm not mad at it. I'm as a young player, up-and-coming player, but when you're talking about where's a player at, where a player is right now at this moment, I thought that might be, fair. But then I start to look at the players around him. And just to name a couple names, at 48 is LaMelo Ball. That's kind of crazy to me. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought that was Lonzo. LaMelo's an awesome player, actually.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry. But anyway, Zion, Desmond Bane, OG Anunoby, these are the players that's directly ahead of him. And then at 44, Aaron Gordon, okay? And Aaron Gordon is, to me, the best comparison for Amen Thompson right now at this stage of his career. This pseudo defensive wing that does it all, can make an impact defensively and offensively with his energy, with his offensive prowess, right? And that I think is where Amen Thompson is actually coming in at. But Aaron Gordon actually has a ring to show for it, right? So I think deservedly that pedigree warrants him to be ahead of Amen at this point in time. So when you talk about some of those names, I mean, LaMelo Ball and Zion Williamson are arguably superstars, even though they've dealt with injury histories that has probably made them drop. And for Amen Thompson to be right in that area, man, I think that's pretty good for a second-year guy going into his third year. And until Amen shows that he can create offense with the ball in his hands consistently, I think this is the range he's gonna stay in.
Honestly, I came into this being a little bit more disappointed, more so just thinking that, he's already got this reputation as arguably the best perimeter defender in the NBA already after just 2 years in the NBA. The only other argument you make is maybe you put Alex Caruso up there. I don't know. There's maybe one or two other names that you could float as Lou Dort. They're all just members of the Thunder at this point, but legitimately, arguably the best perimeter defender in the NBA. I realize now that that's doing his defensive impact is doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this poll. And then you actually go, if you go towards the list of the players that clocked in behind him on this poll directly. First off, I think it's hilarious that he came in one spot ahead of Tyler Herro. Like that's just icy. That's perfect. I love that. Cherry on top. But I cannot get the image of him getting ragdolled across Toyota Center out of my mind. I think about that at least like once a week, man. It lives rent free in my head. Anyways, after Tyler Herro at 50, you've got Rudy Gobert at 51. You've got Embiid at 52. Now, granted, the injury stuff with Embiid, sure, but two very high level, obviously Rudy Gobert, multi-time DPOY player, Joel Embiid, very transformative defensive player in his own right. Draymond Green at 53, another multi-time DPOY player. And so it feels right that these guys who, Draymond, Rudy, these are guys who are so transformative on the defense side of the ball, but at times leave a little bit of something to be desired offensively. Draymond has the playmaking, so you give him that, right? But he is not a guy who's a self-creator or an offensive initiator for himself, or his whole playmaking gambit is very reliant on like the players around him to actually be able to put the ball in the bucket. And then Rudy, right? Nothing offensively. So it does make some sense to me after looking at the other names around this list that Amen, I do feel like he's kind of slotted into the right spot. Now you mentioned the offensive side of things for him, right? And that's really what we're hoping to see, the biggest step forward, because if you're already like a 99th percentile defender, one of, if not the best defender for your position in the NBA, how does he grow? How does he get better? It's all going to be on the offensive side of the ball. So my question to you, Madison, is let's pretend we fast forward a year from now, right? Mm-hmm. What does where do you think Amen Thompson can be on this top 100 list, and what does he have to do to get there this season offensively?
Well, I think he definitely has to become a force getting downhill consistently. This Rockets team, and we'll talk about this in future episodes, but this Rockets team is going to really lack ball handling and the ability to get downhill into the paint. But that is Amen Thompson's one strength. And he's going to have to develop his ball handling, right? His handle, he needs to have the handle on a string so he can not only get downhill and score at the basket, but also use that gravity to unleash his passing game, right? Which is we know that's his vision. It's something that's been marketed for him since he came out in the draft. And so that's one of these parts of his game he hasn't yet unlocked, just because the rest of his offensive game doesn't warrant him to be guarded and double teamed and triple teamed. So once he's able to he's already lightning quick. It's just getting that handle on a string, right? Where he can get downhill at will and really impose his physical gifts at the basket. I think that's something tangible that Amen Thompson can do right away next year. And also adding that mid-range game, which we know he's been working really hard on this offseason. If he can add a respectable mid-range game, which gives him a bit of an in-between, he already has the floater, right? But if he can have a 15-foot jump shot, that will force guys to guard him in those areas of the court, which will unleash his ability to get downhill. And so those, I think, are the two key areas that are realistic stepping stones that he can step in right now and do and move, 10 to 15 spots up this list.
10 to 15 spots is pretty good. I'm looking at, thinking about, how does Amen Thompson, crack the top 30, top 25, whatever. And I think we're on the same page here. Like, a lot of people make it out to be, shooting is obviously, that's at a premium in today's NBA. You want every player on the court to be able to shoot. It provides spacing. It unlocks a lot for your offense. But if given the choice for Amen Thompson, if you could treat it like 2K and just like increase one of his sliders, by 10 points, 15 points, buy some VC and unlock some stuff. I don't play 2K anymore. I don't know if that's how it works. But point being, it's got to be the handle, right? Because Amen Thompson could never develop a legitimate 3-point shot. And if you just gave him an increased handle, if he gets the ball on a string and everything else stays the same, that's still like a top 30, top 35 player with the way that he's playing on the defensive side of the floor and giving him that consistent ability to get downhill, to put pressure on a defense and to leverage his innate playmaking ability, his court vision, but actually having the weapon of being an offensive threat and not just a play finisher, but a play creator, especially in the half court. We see how lethal he can be in transition when he gets the ball going and he's got, full head of steam and he's charging through, in transition, but it's in the half court where things still look a little shaky, where he's not super comfortable, navigating, snaking through a pick and roll, or, defenders are constantly going to go under the screen on him and they're not going to respect that outside jumper. So he's got to find ways to be able to attack. And so I think we're on the same page there. If he can just work on we've seen the videos, right? He's been in the gym with the guard whisperer this offseason and doing all this kind of work. So if he comes into this season with a tighter handle, then look out. The offensive leap could be right around the corner for Amen Thompson.
And just to give an example, there's proof of this. Ben Simmons, you know what I mean? Ben Simmons is proof of offensive fulcrum with the ball.
Proof of concept. It's right there.
Proof of concept is right there. Russell Westbrook. So that this is, easy pickings for him.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Coming up, we will talk about Fred VanVleet clocking in at 64, which is a little higher than I thought he'd make it on the top 100 list, but he's still, for some Rockets fans, a bit of a polarizing character on the team. We'll talk about that, as well as should Jabari, Tari, or Big Steve-O have made the cut in the top 100. We'll get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Look, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your smartphone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Look, when I started using Monarch, one of the things that I immediately noticed was how many subscription services I was paying for that I wasn't even actually using, right? There's no worse feeling than, you're checking your bank statement or whatever, and then bam, you get charged, $15, $20, $25 for whatever, for something you don't even care about anymore. And you tell yourself, oh, I'll go deal with it. I'll cancel it. I'll whatever. And then next month, it's the exact same story. You forgot to deal with it. With Monarch, you can see all of those in one category, all your subscription services, and you can handle them and be more on top of managing your spending. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, if you want to take a look at the top 100 list yourself, you can check it out in the YouTube comments. If I was a better host, I would have prepared the graphics like I had on the first two iterations of this show, but I didn't download the graphics. So we're just ripping it and we're just doing audio only. I apologize, YouTube audience. My bad. All right, let's talk a little bit about Fred VanVleet. He clocked in at 64th, which is honestly better than I thought he would do on this poll. Is Fred VanVleet the 64th best player in the NBA? Maybe not. I'm a little ambivalent about this one, but at the same time, the 2 seeds probably doing some work. And look, this is not to discredit Fred. I think Fred plays a very integral role on this Rockets team. And that's more so what I want to talk about, even less so than just he's at 64, who's around him, who's ahead, who's behind. More just this idea, Madison, I can't believe that we're 2 years in and Fred is still this very polarizing character amongst Rockets fans. You would think that through 2 years of seeing how important Fred has been to this team, that people would start to realize, hey, this guy does impact winning at a very high level. Yes, there's some nights where he's, maybe taking a few more threes or shot chucking a bit more than you'd like to see. But I think there's also context to be provided behind that, right? It's not Fred, I think there's a lot of nights where Fred would be happy if everybody else just picked up the slack offensively and if he didn't have to try and carry the offensive load. And that's the beauty of the iteration of this team we're about to see this next season is KD's going to have the number one slot offensively. Then Sengun and Amen alternating as that 2-3 offensive option. Fred's going to get to take more of a back seat offensively. And I think that's going to do wonders for his efficiency, for preserving him, for making sure that he's, at his peak defensively as well, being part of the head of the snake there. It's going to do wonders for him, man.
Yeah, to me, this position for Fred is a nod to winning, right? I mean, what Fred doesn't jump off a stat sheet, right? But the consistency and the winning pedigree that he brings to your team warrants him to be up this list, right? And I think this is one of the things that the guys actually got right, because if you put Fred VanVleet on your team, you're going to have a winning team. You know what I mean? Fred VanVleet hasn't played on many losing teams, and that guy just knows how to get stuff done. And the Rockets are the biggest proof of that, right? As he's come onto this team, he's settled our guys down. He's got them lined up. He's held them accountable, and now he's our pseudo engine. And like you said, moving forward, I do think Fred will have a bit more of a role in the offense just because Jalen Green is gone. And I believe Alperen Sengun will need a screen and roll partner, and that's not kind of what Kevin Durant does. He doesn't run a lot of screen and roll, so I do think he'll still be more in a setup like he was when the first season. But I think that's good for Fred. I think that's good stuff for him. And I'm interested to see how he plays off of everybody and how I think the Rockets play differently this year. But I think Fred, of course, his winning pedigree has vaulted him up this list.
One thing that we're gonna be talking about this in a future episode where we kind of highlight and break down our expectations for the Rockets offense. But how much does Fred's role change? You brought up the fact that year one of Fred and Alpi playing together, and that dynamic duo, that was the bread and butter of the Rockets offense. Like they spammed that Fred VanVleet, Alperen Sengun pick and roll because it was like the one reliable play that they could go to every single game, right? And so they used and abused the hell out of that duo. It felt like we saw maybe a little less of it last season, and in part because there were some stretches where you wanted, Jalen to get his touches. You wanted Alpi to be the one kind of initiating rather than relying on Fred to set him up offensively, as well as just kind of the not your turn, my turn, but the kind of everybody eats offense that Ime would run. So you saw more opportunities for Dylan Brooks. You saw some moments where Jabari and Tari were able to, step out of their little boxes a little bit and do a little bit more offensively at times. And so, with Fred in this upcoming season, I expect his role to be reduced, but I think because of the reduction in role, it'll allow him to be able to impact the game in the areas where he needs to impact the game at a higher level. Namely, I just expect his 3-point shooting to go up. Like that's been the thing is he had a down year shooting the ball, and I fully expect that number to bounce back up to closer to his career averages from three, because now instead of, some nights becoming the de facto number one option, like if Jalen just was getting clamped or didn't have it offensively and maybe it's a bad matchup for Sengun or whatever, Fred would feel the need and the pressure to step up and try and deliver offensively. Yeah. And that's not his role on the team. There's some nights where he's bombing threes and it looks great, like against the Thunder, but then there's other games where he doesn't have it either, but because he's the vet and he's aware that the team is struggling, he's trying to put the team on his back to drag them to a dub. And now he doesn't have to do that because now he's got KD to do that, to fill that role, right?
Exactly. No, I totally agree. I think his percentages are going to go up. And also just another year with the young guys getting better, learning how to learning and bettering their craft and finding Fred VanVleet as a catch and shoot player, right? I think Fred VanVleet's catch and shoot stats are always pretty consistent. I feel that if like you said, sometimes he has to force the issue and get those shots up. But if you catch him in the corner, where he's decently open, I trust Fred to knock that down in the biggest situations. So I think that in and of itself will also improve his efficiency.
Is Fred VanVleet a top 10 point guard in the NBA?
I doubt it. The point guard.
I'm trying to run through this list. Deep. It is incredibly deep. Like here's the thing, right? Is SGA is a point guard?
I think he's a 2, but
all right, 2. All right, fine. You know what? Fine. Luke is a point guard. Steph's a point guard. Brunson's a point guard. Donovan Mitchell's not a point guard. He's a 2. That's 3. Halliburton's a point guard. That's 4. Cade is a point guard. That's 5. Booker played like a point guard, but he's a 2. So we're still at 5. I'm like rolling. Yeah. Trae Young is 6. Darius Garland, that's 7. Ja Morant, that's 8. Who we got? I'm speeding through this. Fox, that's 9. Murray, that's 10. Derek White, that's 11. Maxey, that's 12.
Yeah,
Kyrie, Kyrie, that's 13. I want to see how many we get until we get to Fred. Now I'm just rolling through this list like speed running. LaMelo, that's 14. And then we're almost to Fred. Dame makes 15. Reeves a 2.
Yes,
he's like a pseudo 2 though.
Yeah.
All right, Reeves, and then that gets us to Fred. So Fred VanVleet not even somehow finished 64th best player in the NBA, but not even top 15 in point guards. It's crazy how deep the point guard spot is in the NBA. That's nuts.
Yeah, man, it's deep. It's the deepest position in the league for sure.
All right, coming up. Should Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, or Steven Adams have made the top 100 cut? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by OpenPhone. Look, if you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a different service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait around? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a total game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. And their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a single customer. And OpenPhone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's OpenPhone, OPENPHONE.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And a final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, now in this poll, Madison, Rockets had 4 names repping on the top 100 list. Fred was the last one at 64th. And there were other impact players for this Rockets team that maybe felt like they probably could have made the top 100 cut, but ultimately didn't. And I will preface this before we get to the Jabari, Tari, and Adams part of this discussion, is that it was a very interesting kind of like debate being brought up amongst the Locked On hosts while we were doing this poll. And this idea that like players who are starting caliber players are like have, I don't know if it's like intrinsically more value than like a player who's in a smaller role off the bench, or this idea that, again, there's 30 teams in the NBA. So 30 times 5, that means there's 150 starting caliber players in the NBA. And that a player who plays anywhere from 32 to 37 minutes a night deserves a higher spot on the top 100 list than a player who only plays 15 to 20 to 25 minutes a night. And like a number of Locked On hosts were like bought in on this ideology. And I was looking at like, I was like, what the hell are y'all talking about? Like there are a lot of bench players that are better than starting caliber players all across the NBA. And I think the Rockets have a prime example of 3 of them. Jabari, Tari, and Steve-O are definitely some of the best players in the NBA. Now, do they all deserve a spot on the top 100? I don't know, but I could run through some of the names here at the back end of this top 100, and I would certainly take Jabari, Tari, or Steve-O over a lot of these guys here at the back end of this list.
Yeah, I think Steve-O is the biggest one. Like I think Steven Adams.
Jakob Poeltl, 93. Yeah. I think all 30 teams. The Toronto Raptors would take Steven Adams over Jakob Poeltl right now if you're trying to win games. Are you kidding me?
And the same thing that we talked about, Fred VanVleet, guys that impact winning, right? There's no, there's not many centers that impact winning the way Steven Adams impacts winning, right? I mean, his ability to play in a too big system just because of his intangibles alone, it's the same thing. Steven Adams is in the same way that you think of Fred VanVleet as this table setter, as this guy who does everything the position requires of you. Steven Adams does that and more. And so I think it's very fair that Steven Adams belongs on this list, especially ahead of these guys in the back 20. Like I really think he really belongs on this list, but I understand injuries has kind of slowed him down, and he hasn't played the same amount of minute share, and he has lost a step or two. But it seems like he's been gaining those steps back though. He's become faster and better over the course of the season, and so I definitely understand it. And I think Steven Adams is a sneaky candidate to start for the Rockets at certain points for next year in a double big lineup with Sengun. I think soon as Sengun starts shooting the ball, MA's going to find a way to put Steven Adams in that starting lineup. And I won't be surprised if there's some matchups in the playoffs where they just start Steven Adams, especially how slow our pace is going to be next year.
I would love, this is such a random like aside here, and we'll look at some of the most interesting lineups for the Rockets this season ahead of training camp and everything, and some of the lineups we're most excited to see in action, and their best offensive lineup, best defensive lineup, that kind of thing, the Twin Towers lineups, all of that. But for me, this idea that like, I love when coaches do like little things like that. Like I love offense defense substitutions in a game. Ime is known to do that. And I love it whenever he's, because in the grand scheme of things, like, oh, it's one possession, but like one possession every game over 82 games, that's 82 possessions, man. Like that means a lot when you're talking about the difference between being, potentially a top 3 defense versus a top 5 defense. Like, I don't know, little things like that matter to me. And I appreciate them so much from a coaching perspective. And so this idea that like, and some teams do this more than others, right? Some teams have very fluid starting fives. Like OKC does this all the time. Mark Daigneault, he'll flip around the starting 5 depending on the opponent. Sometimes he goes double big. Other times he's just starting, Chet or Hartenstein, and then he goes with the, the multi-guard lineup. Like, I don't know why that's not more common. And maybe it's just because the fact of the matter is most teams have their best 5 players starting, and that's probably the more so the issue. But this idea that you can plug and play and mix and match certain players, this Rockets team feels built to do exactly that this season. And so I'm on board with you, man. I think there's going to be, we're going to do our Rockets board bets like we did at the beginning of this past season. We're all draft up a number of like over unders and predictions and stuff going into the season. And I'm going to have to figure out like what number I want to set for games that Steven Adams starts this year, because I think there's a very big chance that in any games that Kevin Durant misses due to rest, or maybe we don't want KD to get hurt, but chances are he's probably going to miss like anywhere from like 15 to 20 games, being realistic. Like in those games, it just makes a ton of sense to start Steven Adams. It maybe not in place of KD, like maybe you shuffle the lineups around a little bit, but that double big lineup was so damn good that they're going to want to run like at least probably, I would imagine, 15 to 20 minutes of that a night. And the only way to do that in certain stretches is going to be to start Adams.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I mean, like you said, I think teams don't do this because players are creatures of habit and they like to know what they're going to be doing and stuff. I think that's why. And then Mark Daigneault has such a young team, which allows them to innovate, right, with that team. But I definitely agree with you. I mean, Steven Adams, I think, is getting better and better after coming back from the knee injury. But also, I think Jabari could make a strong case to be on this list as well. I mean, this guy, when you get back to the back 20, these are firmly high-level role players that play their role at a high level. And I think the only thing that's missing from Jabari is a little bit more consistency. He just needs to get a little bit better at everything that he does well. But Jabari almost does everything well. He's everything you want in a starter. He's a switchable big that has an incredible range.
He does everything well, but he doesn't do anything truly elite yet. He's like 85th percentile in a lot of different categories. He doesn't have that one truly elite skill, which is, we hope, is going to be the shooting this season, right? He got off to such a bad start this past year. And if you remove that like horrendous shooting November that he had to start the year, his numbers actually popped last season from 3. And that's the impressive thing about him.
Yeah. And I think his impressive play in the playoffs, especially his shot making in the playoffs, is gonna do a lot for his confidence and just him getting another year of being a professional. And I squarely think if I was looking at next year, projecting for it, I could bet you he's going to be better than the players, or deservedly in the back half of this list. And like you said, even if he became, he stayed the same at his shooting, but his defense took another step where we could put him on the best best players at times. You know what I mean? Which we already do, but he actually locks those guys down. He takes a step with his strength. He takes a step with his ball handling. He takes a step with his processing, right? Which sometimes could just be a half step off, right? If he just takes a step on that and no longer has those mental lapses, Jabari Smith becomes a different type of player. And I think that's all he needs to get in this league, get on this list.
Would you have ranked Jabari or Tari higher than 92?
Higher than 92. Those players, I mean, I think they have a case over quickly.
92 is Jalen Green, by the way. I'm just get out of frame really quick.
I looked at everybody 91 and that's God just saving me from that.
Oh man, you know what? We want to know how you would have ranked Jabari, Tari, and Steven Adams. Should they have been in the top 100 list? How do you feel about where Amen Thompson clocked in at 49th and Fred VanVleet at 64th? Also, go check out the KD episode with him at 11 and Alperen Sengun at 36th. Somehow behind Domantas Sabonis still. I don't know when people are going to wake up to that one, but give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Madison, you know the drill. Let me know where to track you down at.
You can find me at Madman Leaks on Twitter. Come talk Rockets basketball, the NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.